So the first thing I wanted to ask, how do you describe why your source wanted this released? I understand that, but walk me into how this came into your possession.
Yeah. So it came in. Let me kind of give you, I guess, would you like sort of a verification timeline, I suppose?
That'd be fine too. Whatever you
Okay.
can provide, just so we can understand how you got what
Yeah.
you got.
So this is, we have, when we launched, Mug Club and we partnered with Rumble, we were very forward about the fact that we have an investigative journalism unit and that we'll go to jail to protect our sources, right, if we need to, that we will keep them anonymous. It's encrypted, it's verified. So we get a lot of tips that come through the tip line, the Proton Mail, and this was one that was sent out, and then we went through the process of verifying it. So that involved an anonymous source to kind of, and I have to be careful because I want to make sure that I keep these people anonymous without giving too many details. So if you have questions, you can feel free to kind of, ask me something and I'll tell you if I can't answer that because you're a stranger. But the anonymous source, they reached.
I live in the same world, man.
Yeah.
I make my living off of anonymous sources, so I totally understand.
Well, and in this case, it's appropriate, right? As opposed to like an anonymous source said that Donald Trump's a pile of crap. It's like, well, we don't really need an anonymous source for TMZ stuff like that. But in this case, obviously, because people's jobs can be at stake, and a lot of these folks don't necessarily trust the people who are in positions of authority, and let alone the media. So this source was kind of vague, right? Came to us through the tip line. Then a Mug Club undercover journalist followed up with an email and a phone call to, let's call this person source number one. They sent us pictures, right, or to the journalists after several phone calls. Okay. Then after that, our journalist, the undercover unit from Mug Club, flew to Nashville to meet with source one, review the phone, the text thread, which included a source within the Nashville PD. We'll call that source two. A detective involved. The journalist from our end verified that the text thread was from 2 days after the shooting and verified the phone number, authenticated source two as someone who was directly involved with the Nashville PD and was there actually, in fact, on the scene of the crime. So there were multiple verification steps, and I believe that we were not the only person that this source reached out to. They're very happy with how we tried to portray it as accurately as possible, and they were actually, for us, when a source reaches out, and they're apprehensive about us doing due diligence, we often simply don't follow up. This was someone who wanted to ensure that it was authentic and actually welcomed, the process.
Okay. So from what I understand from your explanation is that your journalist that works for your team saw the images on the phone, but not the actual paper itself. So just the images that was sent that day.
Correct.
Okay.
The images the images that were there with a detective involved with this who confirmed it.
Gotcha. So your first source, not talking about the detective that ultimately sent the picture, because that's what's accurate, correct? It was a Metro detective that sent it to your source.
It was confirmed by them, yeah.
Okay, got you. Oh, the detective confirmed it to your person as well.
Yes.
Okay. How do you explain why your source wanted this released?
Well, I would imagine that it's very much in line with why everyone else wanted it released. When we have Christchurch, when we have Jacksonville, when there's a laundry list of manifestos that are out there that portray this one way and are used, obviously, as a springboard, used as a cudgel for gun control. This was one that didn't really follow along with that narrative, and a lot of people thought that it was necessary for this to be out there. And there are people involved with the Nashville PD who also believe that things haven't been necessarily transparent and that it affects people. Look, this is someone who had a motivation, and this is someone with a very clear target. And so this can actually be productive in the sense that this can actually inform people as to, when we're talking about mental health, when we're talking about the struggle, as opposed to just jumping to gun control, we have information here that is relevant, that does provide context.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen, your staff is pretty good, I think, about keeping up to date on things, but you may have seen that the mayor's office is now calling for an investigation into your source.
Yes.
I wonder what you think about it.
Well, I'm wondering why the mayor didn't run an investigation into the shooting, because that's what they claimed, right? They claimed that they were, but nothing. They claim that they have all of these documents, and I have yet to hear anyone from the police department. I know a spokesperson for the police chief said, we don't know anything about that. Well, hold on, are you running an investigation? In which case this would interfere, which would mean that you would be immediately familiar with what we release. And we have staked our reputation on the line. We are willing to. I stand by it. My sources stand by it. For them to say they don't know, what is it that they don't know? No one has even attempted to refute it. By the way, I've also seen a lot of other people out there claim that they have confirmed its authenticity through their own sources, and I know that that's false, right? That's sort of a tag my name on there as well, where they want to act as though they have sources out there doing the groundwork. I know that there would be no way for them to confirm it.
Yeah, that is, there is a small number of people that have actually seen the documentation itself. I never want to misquote, so I'm looking for the email that was actually sent out from the mayor's office, because that's what it's important that I get your response.
Sure.
Exactly what he's saying is that he's dictated the Metro's law director to initiate an investigation into how these images could have been released. That investigation may involve local, state, and federal authorities. I am deeply concerned with the safety, security, and well-being of the Covenant families and all Nashvillians who are grieving. What's your response to his concern?
I'm deeply concerned with their safety as well, because 6 people are dead, 3 of them children. And we now know the motivation, or at least we have an idea as to the motivation. When their police chief went out and said, oh, maybe at some point we'll run an investigation, it's right there. How do we know what the motivation is? Because they said the motivation. How do we know who the targets were if they were pre-selected? The shooter claims that the targets were pre-selected. It's very clear. I shouldn't say very clear. This is someone who's obviously mentally deranged, of course, as well. Just to be clear, like this is someone who was not mentally healthy. So when we also have this discussion about mental health in this country, well, then we need to examine why this person was mentally unwell. Why this person talks about their anxiety, what it was that made this person tick, how this person wasn't able, if they were seeing people for help. And like you just said, the mayor is now investigating the leaks. That's why it was leaked to us. The source said because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And we called, by the way, this exact backlash on the program. We said, this is how we expect the media to cover it. There will be some attack the messenger. There will be some people, the clickbait farms out there. And I know that you're an actual journalist, so it must aggravate you as much as anyone else. It's like Ben Affleck with Good Will Hunting. Like, toss my name on there as well. We did the legwork. And that's because these people feel as though, well, not feel. Their voice is not heard. The truth has not been covered. And it was a necessity to them.
I'm glad that you brought this up, because as journalists, we want the entire manifesto released. We want that so we can examine it for context. We can use experts to evaluate this. You have only released 3 pages, and I'm wondering if you think that's irresponsible.
Why would that be irresponsible?
Because there isn't a context to it.
What I think is irresponsible is, how long has it been since this shooting?
Roughly at 8 to 9 months?
Yeah, somewhere between, I think it's late 7, call it 8 months. Okay. Who's been involved in this investigation? I mean, not only the PD, right, but you have the FBI involved. These people saying that it's, this information should not get out there. They want this suppressed. But they haven't been able to name any other people of interest with their investigation. And the American public has seen nothing. We know more about the Christchurch shooting, which, by the way, if you look at that manifesto, it was trolling. I don't know if you know this. Not a lot of white supremacists are actually watching Candace Owens or Ben Shapiro. A lot of it was clearly meant to be, if not... I shouldn't even say satire. It was just meant to be dishonest, and that was covered. In this case, this is authentic. This is someone who was deranged. This is someone who was steeped their entire life, it seems, in the modern progressive ideology. You don't use the term white privilege unironically before you commit a mass shooting. Crackers, if you look at the language that's being used. Of course, they were misspelled, which also is a terrible indictment of our public education system. We released what it is that we have. I sincerely don't believe for a second, and I don't think that you do, that any of this would have ever been released if not for what took place today. I hope if they have more and there's more context, great. I want to. Our job here is done. I hope that there's more transparency, that there is more truth. If there's 20 pages that would show that this clearly was someone who was another right-wing extremist, a white supremacist, if that would be the case, hey, I will gladly go out and condemn it wholeheartedly, as I condemn any shooting, because it's not very hard for me to condemn white supremacy. And this is something that we've talked about. White supremacists are assholes. I'm assuming that you can obviously censor this. I have no problem saying, can't stand white supremacists. These people are morons. They're basically just socialists who believe that socialism would work if you did it with people who have less melanin in their skin. I associate with them zero. It's a lot harder for the mayor. It's a lot harder for the leftist media, for those people who would be involved in the legacy media. It's a lot harder for public educators to say, absolutely, I have nothing in common with gender ideology and, for example, the idea of checking white privilege. But they can't. They can't separate themselves from that, because that's something that they've regurgitated ad hominem. They did it when the shooting took place, making sure, tripping over themselves to ensure the proper use of pronouns. I don't believe for a second that the media was ever going to actually do some digging and try to get to the truth of this. They had 8 months.
So, I'm not going to stand on my pulpit and argue about what we, have been able to do and haven't been able to, but I have made it clear that, as journalists, we have wanted this and we've asked for it and we've gone to court to try and get it. But we have our own, reasons for wanting to inform the public in our way. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously.
And what would those reasons be?
For my reasons would be for full transparency, for a greater understanding, and given with context about who this person was and why this person did it. But I will also say that we have heard repeatedly that this was a person that was so mentally ill that there may not be any understanding of why she did what she did because she was so mentally ill. Mm-hmm. But I don't have the entire conflict. I don't have all of her writings.
I noticed you say she. Why do you say she?
Well, I will say she because I have interviewed her attorney for the family, and the family refers to her as she. And although she identified as transgender, she's not here to basically describe for herself what she preferred to be. So at this point, I am going with what the family and how they described her. But we're also.
But why? Let me ask you this: why are we taking the family's word for it? Right? Because this person was, I believe, 28 years old. Right, Aiden is how they last referred to themselves. Right, they were becoming a male. And when they committed this shooting, they identified as a male. This family,
that's right,
has not seen the man. Handed it over to the authorities.
Has not seen them. According to the family, they have not seen the manifesto.
So when the shooting happened, right, it was a game of walking backwards with landmines, where people were being condemned for using the wrong pronouns. Now, I'm not pulling a gotcha with you. I'm saying that happened with everyone out there when they were covering this. And now people are saying, well, the authority would be the family or the lawyer. The family couldn't know. Why is the family an authoritative source? They handed it over to the police department, who, by the way, have refused to give anything to the public. This is one of those issues, right, where you go, okay, if you want to get to the truth and you are stonewalled by those in positions of power, all we're left with is a couple of days of the shooting, people being attacked for using the wrong pronouns, and then moving on because it's not a convenient tool to use for gun control.
Yeah, I think that, all we can do as journalists is lay it out as the truth in terms of what her gender was when she was born and what she preferred to use as she became an adult. And I think that's how we kind of, frame it, at least for our purposes, at least reporting it, hopefully, is that. I do want to ask you, obviously you identify as a conservative.
Sure.
And you will have your critics that will say, okay, you've got an agenda in all this. So what's your end game?
Yeah, I'm not unbiased, just to be clear. I'm not at all. And I don't pretend to be. What we do is largely entertainment. It was a late night show that we realized people were watching more in the morning, so we moved it to morning. It's late night in the morning. We do have an investigative journalism unit because it's largely dead. And most people out there aren't doing it. This is proof positive that it's not being done. And it's unfortunate because, for example, if we were to go back, Watergate, I just say that because it's ubiquitous, right? Everything's become a gate now. Zippergate, Watergate, Cigargate, anything. They toss a gate and they're like, that's a great headline. You couldn't do that today. Why not? Because we have these laws in the country to protect investigative journalists, also to protect free speech, that involve, for example, being single-party consent states, which mean that and this is remedial, but for people out there who may not, if you're a journalist and you're trying to catch someone in the act of something corrupt, let's say like Watergate, you can record it. You have that right. The problem is most of the information out there today, and this is something that journalists run up against, Facebook, right, Meta, YouTube, Alphabet, a handful of companies control the flow of all information. And they don't even follow the laws. They enjoy the protection of Section 230. They're treated as though they are open platforms. But you can record something entirely legally, and YouTube says, oh, that person doesn't want to be out there, so then they remove it. How are you ever supposed to expose corruption? We've sat down and done interviews. We've done Change My Minds where people sit down, sign a release, and on camera spell their name, say, I consent to this interview. Later on, didn't like how they were portrayed, and we had to either blur their face or remove the video entirely. That's what's worrisome to me. And I wonder if that's why no one did the digging that needed to be done for this story. If it's because going up against these big tech giants, it's really a tripopoly, is just something that seems like an insurmountable task. But we shouldn't have gotten to this first. It's bittersweet to me. We have an investigative journalism unit because people out there aren't doing it. Because largely, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I will say, as one of the reporters that wants to see all of the writing, my goal has always been to see all of the writings. so I could put that into context. What
Sure.
you have gotten is a couple pages.
Okay.
And so I do think there is a bit of criticism here that what you put out is just a sliver of the story and doesn't give the whole story. And that's what's dangerous.
So did you ever have access to any pages? Any pages? I'm saying, I know you want all of them, but
did you review what I have seen as well? But I will tell you that I don't have all the writings. I do not have that.
do you have any writings?
Again, I have to protect my sources too. But I will tell you this.
I'm not asking you. I'm not asking you to reveal sources. I'm asking you, do you have any writings? In other words, of all the, right, this is NBC in Nashville, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News, not to mention all the online networks. No one has anything? And the criticism is you released some pages when no one's really been doing their due diligence or really putting in the legwork to get any pages. I would love for all of it to be released. We have been on our program calling for it all to be released. No one's done it, and it was never going to happen. We released what we had, and I hope that everything is released.
Well, we do agree on that too, and I just really appreciate, Stephen, you doing this for me and doing it for everybody else in telling this part of the story, because it is an important part of the story. Now, I've unfortunately got to go do my part, and so I just appreciate you doing this.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and and I really do hope that someone gets everything. I really do hope that happens, because I would love the dialogue to be based on transparency, but you're not getting it from the FBI or local police department. They're more interested in obfuscating. And that is something that, look, I don't know where you line up politically. I'm very open, transparent about my worldview, especially coming from being a comedian. It doesn't pay to lie about that. I would hope that everyone from all walks who, not even as journalists themselves, believes in the importance of journalism, sees this as something that needs to change, sees this lack of transparency and a few colluding forces refusing to provide information that could potentially save lives and chart a course for the future, that everyone agrees and says, all right, at a certain point, there can't just be a couple of people at the top of this funnel who control all of this information. I hope that someone gets everything, and I hope that if you and I were to talk this time next week, it would be a conversation based on the entire manifesto that has been provided to a wanting public from either the FBI or the police department.
We'll do it. When it comes out, you and I will have another conversation, because I think that'll be important to hear your voice on this. So thank you,
I appreciate
Stephen.
it, brother. Thank you.